everybody, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Mike Sherbino, and I'm here at the Pumpkin Patch in Kelowna, British Columbia. And I'm here with my new granddaughter, Lucy. Lucy, can you say hi? Lucy is our newest supporter of The Perspective at 5 weeks. Isn't that amazing? Hey, all this week I'm going to be visiting different places in British Columbia, so watch for the cameo appearances on the program. Lorie Hartshorn is holding down the program for us with interviews, some amazing Bible teaching, and we're glad that you're with us today on The Perspective.
Well, thanks, Mike. Welcome to The Perspective, friends. We have a very exciting day today. We're going to learn a lot. I'm joined by Dr. Steve Grcevich. He's a child and adolescent psychiatrist. For over 40 years, he has experience as a clinician, a researcher, professor, and he's a founder and president of Key Ministry, an organization that's helping churches reach and include families that are affected by mental health issues. Now, can I just say, we're all there in some level or other, and we're going to come out in this conversation today is that actually getting to church can be really hard when you're struggling with anxiety or depression or even ADHD. Things that are maybe hidden to others. So we're really going to learn from Dr. Steve today. He's also the author of a mental health in the church book. So welcome, Steve, to The Perspective. It's going to be a great conversation. Well, welcome to The Perspective, Dr. Steve. It's really great to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing to promote mental health awareness in the church.
Well, this is a very important topic, and I'm really grateful you're here today to, really just help educate us, inspire us, inform us. We really need to grow in this area. Let's go back. I want to hear a bit of your story. You've spent 4 decades in psychiatry. You've worked with children's, teens, families. I'd love to hear what drew you into this line of work and into the mental health field, and how has that shaped your faith as you cared for people over the years?
So I had kind of an interesting path into psychiatry. Um, I got accepted into medical school when I was 17 years old. We had a unique program in our region at the time that accepted candidates straight out of high school, gave us an accelerated college experience, and then tossed us into med school and what would typically be the first semester of your junior year. And I had not given psychiatry a whole lot of thought, when I was in high school and thinking about this process. I planned to be a family practitioner, but hated my OB-GYN rotation so bad that I knew that I couldn't rotate through that again. But some of the things that drew me to psychiatry were that one, I was looking for something where the knowledge base was defined enough that I could feel reasonably expert. Because one of the challenges being a primary care doc is that there's always somebody who knows better how to take care of your patients than you do for a specific problem. So the fact that there was a specific knowledge set and it was something I thought I could master was attractive. Second, I found that I liked talking to patients more than I liked reading about them. And so, the opportunity maybe to spend more time with people was something that was very attractive at first. Um, I found that I liked kids more than I liked adults, so that drew me specifically into child and adolescent psychiatry. And finally, I mean, to be really honest, when you do your required rotations in medical school, I mean, I was really shocked at the poor quality of care that a lot of the folks were receiving at the time in psychiatry, and thought that it was something where fairly early on in my career, I'd be able to make a tangible and significant difference.
Hmm. Wow, that's really good. It's really good how God draws us, shapes us, moves us through our careers. And I can see your heart for people. At the end of the day, you really wanted to provide some help. What was in those years, what would you say was the most meaningful thing? You mentioned children and youth. Was there a sort of a point, a moment that you thought, wow, I just really know God's using me in this area?
So that moment wasn't so much in medical school. It was probably a little bit later on. So this is maybe 5 to 10 years after I'd finished my fellowship, the late 1990s. I'm serving on the elder board at our church in suburban Cleveland. And we had had a very large cohort of families after the fall of the Iron Curtain who went over to Russia and Bulgaria and adopted kids out of these orphanages with some very complex neurodevelopmental disorders, emotional, behavioral issues, and kids who'd been exposed to all kinds of complex trauma and neglect. And so I'm sitting in this elder board meeting, and the woman who at the time was our children's ministry director came to do a presentation to talk about all of the things that the church was starting to do to try to support these families. Because these were folks who were really, highly committed, well grounded in their faith, folks who, were sort of on path to be significant leaders, elders, key volunteers, their small group leaders. And a lot of these families were having a very difficult time staying engaged with the church because of the struggles that they were dealing with, managing and, parenting these kids. So at the time, I'm running a fairly large sort of child, mental health practice group in the suburbs of Cleveland. I started thinking to myself, wonder how much of a problem church attendance is for the kinds of families that we're seeing in a practice like ours. And at the time, if I were thinking about like the most common diagnoses among the kids, it was probably ADHD, anxiety, depression, kids on the high end of the autism spectrum with all the stuff that goes along with that. So, not in a formal way like I would write up if we were, publishing a research study, but as a more informal survey over the next few months as families cycled through our practice, I asked everybody one question. And that question was, did the problems that brought you to our practice significantly impact your family's ability to attend church or your place of worship? And I was blown away by some of the stories that I started to hear and came to realize that, for families who are raising kids with like significant, emotional behavioral issues, church attendance and the ability to be part of church and to participate in the life of the church was a really big problem. And so, as God would orchestrate things, I had one of the three original research grants for Adderall. And so there was probably like a 6 or 7 year period of time where I was invited to do more lectures around the country probably than anybody else in my specialty. And I would mention something about the work that our church was doing where I would go to try to like support these kids and these families. And they started getting inundated with requests for help. And that was how Key Ministry got started, specifically to help churches and to help connect churches with families of kids with quote unquote hidden disabilities for the purpose of making disciples of Jesus Christ.
That's beautiful. Like you saw the need right in front of you in your professional realm. But here you are, in your really volunteering, right? We say a board of a church, we're talking about our volunteer ministry. And yet you're seeing God use your skills and abilities in the church to address a need. And I'm sure there was many complex issues for those children, adapting to a new culture and church and the challenges. You said many churches, they want to help people. And we do. We want to help everyone, right? But we're not always equipped. And those who are struggling with mental health issues, even like these families who are challenged with raising these kids, we just don't know how. Um, from your perspective, what's some of the biggest, give me one misconception or barrier that keeps churches from engaging well in this area. We've got about a minute before we're going to break here, but let's just start this conversation with what's a barrier that inhibits us from helping people with these
Okay,
challenges?
let me give you two.
Okay.
One of the things the church does well with, if you think about what's considered like disability or quote unquote special needs ministry, is that we do really well at supporting folks who have significant intellectual, developmental, or physical disabilities. Think about like Johnny Erickson Tata. For folks who are disabled, all of the time, in every circumstance or situation, we do a really good job of being supportive. But the challenge with like these mental health conditions is hidden disabilities is that for a lot of people who struggle with this, they're disabled some, but not all of the time, and in some, but not all environments. And if if your disability gets in the way of your, you know, capacity for being able to be part of Christian community, and growing your faith, that's a really significant issue. And I think that the other error or misperception on the part of the church is that a lot of the struggle that people have related to this is because of some sort of personal sin,
Mm.
or personal shortcoming that they have, and so that these issues are very much stigmatized in the church.
Yes, and you were going to unpack more of that when we return. And as you're listening here to Dr. Steve, just maybe you're that family, maybe you're that person. There's some hidden challenges in your family, your life is maybe not that obvious, but you would like to engage more deeply in your church. I want you to just hang in there with us. We're going to talk more about this when we come right back.
Hey, welcome to The Perspective. Mike Sherbino here. We're glad you're with us.
It's all right here. Watch when you want, where you want.
Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Lorie.
Real stories, honest questions, a fresh perspective, right where you are.
Today, take time to relish in
The Perspective. Follow, like, share. You're part of the mission.
Well, we're back with Dr. Stephen Grcevich, president, founder of Key Ministry. And Dr. Steve, I really appreciate your story and how God has led you to help churches create a space and place where people that have mental health challenges, families that are dealing with challenges, raising kids and youth and feeling like, is church a safe place or a good place to be? In your book, Mental Health at Church, you wrote a few years ago, you talk about 7 key barriers that prevent people with mental health challenges from feeling like they actually belong in church. And we had mentioned a few before our break. Can you pick up and share a few of the other challenges and how it surprises church leaders when you talk about this too?
Yeah, so a way of like sort of setting the groundwork for this is that I would argue that families impacted by mental illness are the largest underserved population by the church in North America. Shortly after my book came out, there was a study published by a guy named Andrew Whitehead with data from over 250,000 interviews with families from 3 waves of the National Children's Health Survey. He was looking at the connection between the presence in the home of a child with a disability and family church attendance. And so, to no one's surprise, if you have a kid with autism, it decreases the likelihood that you're going to set foot in a church by 84%. But it's 73% for families who have a kid with depression. It's 55% for families who have a kid with a disrupted behavior disorder. It's 45% for families who have an anxiety disorder, and around 20% for families who have a kid with ADD or ADHD. And I guess describe 20% of the school age population in North America, touching upon those groups. And so the question is, well, why is church so difficult? And a way of thinking about this, and sort of the model that we describe in the book is based on the cultural model of disability, in that we as a church, we have certain expectations for how people are going to act or interact when we gather together, for worship, for fellowship, for service, for Christian education. And there are certain attributes or traits associated with these common mental health conditions that make it more difficult for folks to enter into our culture. And so, we touched on stigma being the first one. Anxiety is probably the one that impacts like the largest number of people in terms of negatively impacting church attendance. Folks who are anxious, basically your brain is hardwired to overestimate the risk entering into new or unfamiliar situations. And oftentimes folks who struggle with particularly social anxiety start making false assumptions about how they're being perceived or judged by other people. That makes it very difficult to, you know, visit a church for a first time, or to be a part of a small group, or to be a part of a Bible study, or, even, the social kind of interaction and conversation that people engage in at church. Um, Mental health conditions oftentimes significantly impact executive function, which is tied into our capacity for self-control. And so, you read through the book of James that, godliness is oftentimes reflected in our behavior. If you have a mental health condition that makes it harder to stop and think before you say or do things that have negative consequences, church is going to be a struggle. Couple of other barriers quickly would be, people who struggle with social communication, which is, common, with folks who have mental health conditions. People who process sensory environments and sensory information differently. Social isolation is a big one, and past negative experiences of church would be the seventh barrier that
Right.
we oftentimes have to overcome.
So where do we start? What do you say to churches to help break some of those barriers or remove some of those barriers?
So, I mean, I wrote a whole book about this, mental
Yeah.
health in the church, giving, because one of the reasons why I think a lot of places have struggled with this is that, unlike, you know, quote unquote special needs ministry, where, we have buddies, there's respite programs, there's like the Night to Shine prom, that there are established models for dealing with this. The church didn't have a good replicable model for thinking about how you'd approach mental health ministry. Um, if there were two or three places that I would start, I think that the first one would be, for pastors and church leaders to make an effort to become educated about this stuff. To encourage, like, church teams to review. There's an organization, wonderful ministry called Sanctuary Mental Health in Canada, that's developed a fairly extensive sort of online training course that's free and available for church leaders, and they also have a version for people in small groups. Um, there is a place here in the States, Hope and Healing Institute, that's created a lot of similar kinds of educational issues. Getting leaders trained in, mental health first aid. There's a organization called the Church Cares that's tied into Regent University that educates, pastors, church leaders in terms of how to be able to provide practical support. So educating your leadership and educating your people would be a place to start.
Yeah.
The next place that I would start, and this is probably the easiest one for most churches, is to think through, how do we talk about this and how do we communicate um, about mental health issues internally to the church, to our own people, and then to folks in the larger community who are underserved by the church. There was a study by Lifeway Research back in 2013, together with Focus on the Family, looking at mental health issues in the church. And they had interviewed several hundred adult relatives of adults with serious mental illness. And the number one thing that, when they were interviewed, that they wanted from their churches was for their pastors to talk about these issues from the pulpit. Because, like, if a pastor, preaches about mental health issues, it does, it's incredibly powerful in terms of removing the stigma, and it gives folks the ability, and the comfort level to be able to share their own stories with other people
Yeah.
outside of the church. And it doesn't even have to be something as complicated as a sermon. That there was a very large church where, we had been invited in as a team and went in to train their staff. And, as part of our evaluation, we were spending time with them on Sunday morning. And, their lead pastor opened the worship service. It's like, "Welcome to blah, blah, blah church. I'd like to start worship this morning by praying for anybody with us who might be struggling with depression."
Yeah, that's
Boom.
good. Right.
Something as simple as that
Yes.
can be
Yes.
incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And then I would think that the one additional thing that I would encourage churches to do, is to create some sort of invitation or create some sort of resource that their people can then use to invite their friends and neighbors to church. Because probably the best inclusion strategy for somebody with significant mental health struggles is to have a trusted friend alongside them
Yeah.
the first 2 or 3 times that they visit, to navigate like the social interactions that might feel uncomfortable until they end up getting assimilated.
Yeah.
Um, so, while we're prepared to come alongside churches every step of the way. Those would be like the 3 places that I would start.
That is
Look at,
fantastic.
educating yourself, communicating about it within worship services, and then empowering your people to reach out
Yeah.
to folks, in their workplace, in their neighborhood, in their family, who aren't coming to church and aren't being discipled and aren't
Yeah.
coming to Christ because their mental health struggles get in the way.
That is so good, so practical, and we can all do it. Now, I know you have a conference coming up. I'm going to mention that at the close of our show. I'm going to direct people there, but I thank you for your time today, Dr. Steve, and I encourage you to go to Key Ministry, take a look at their resources. We'll be right back.
Did you know you can stream our shows on demand? We are thrilled to announce the launch of our channel on Roku TV. You can now watch the Perspective shows anytime you like and navigate through a variety of playlists. How to find us? Simply search for the Perspective channel, find our logo screen, and save it under your channels of choice on your Roku selection menu. Don't miss out. New feature shows will be updated weekly.
Well, I hope you're getting your hands on our monthly devotional. It's fantastic. And each day, Mike and I will teach from that devotional. And today, we're going to talk about this incredible battle scene in scripture that, well, we usually picture men charging the fight, right? But in this story, the 2 most decisive figures weren't men at all. They were women, Deborah and Jael. Well, Deborah was a prophet. She was a judge in Israel, a woman of great wisdom and courage. And when the nation had drifted from God yet again, it was Deborah who stepped forward to lead, and she heard God's voice clearly and commanded Barak, the general of Israel's army, to gather his troops to go out to battle against Sisera, the commander of the enemy's forces. And Sisera's army was surely terrifying. I mean, they had 900 iron chariots, the ancient equivalent of our tanks, and Israel's troops were completely outmatched. But Deborah, she spoke with authority and conviction, and she said, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, for I will deliver Sisera into your hands." And Deborah wasn't reckless and she wasn't timid. She led with both wisdom and strength, not by her own confidence, but by her confidence in God. And when Barak hesitated, he said, "Well, I'll go if you go with me." Deborah didn't scold him. She didn't tease him or laugh at him. She simply said, "Certainly, I will go with you." And there is a bit of humor, though, in this moment. I mean, think of it. The general, this mighty warrior, says he won't go into battle without her. That's how much faith and authority Deborah carried. But she also gave him a sobering truth. She said, "Because of the course you're taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Now, here's the fascinating part. Deborah wasn't talking about herself. She was talking about another woman, Jael. You see, after Israel's army defeats Sisera's troops, Sisera fled by foot. He's running, he's exhausted, he's desperate, and he found safety and refuge in the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber. She welcomed him in, she gave him milk, she covered him with a blanket, but as soon as he fell asleep, Jael quietly took a tent peg and drove it right through his temple, killing him instantly. Well, when Barak came looking for Sisera, Jael showed him the dead body, and in that moment, Deborah's prophecy was fulfilled. The victory came through a woman. It's dramatic, it's shocking. It's even one more reminder that God uses unexpected people to accomplish his purposes. Deborah led with courage and with wisdom, and Jael, well, she acted with decisive faith and boldness. Together, these women, they show us that women are equally called and gifted by God to lead, to speak, to act, to bring victory to his people. God's kingdom is always advanced through the obedience of both men and women, through those who hear his voice and they respond with courage. You might not be leading an army, I doubt it, but maybe God is calling you to lead in your home, maybe your workplace or at your church. Maybe he's asking you to take a stand when others have hesitated, to step forward in faith when maybe fear is holding people back. Well, like Deborah, lead with wisdom and courage. Like Jael, be decisive when God opens a door for action. And like both of them show us today, give all the glory back to God when victory comes. God delights in using courageous women and men who listen, who obey, and who lead with wisdom and faith in his power. Why don't you call us today if you need some courage and faith or to take that step of action, 1-855-910-6297. We're here for you. Give us a call.
I still remember when I was 18 years old and I accidentally signed up for a mission trip down in Mexico. Now, when I was down there, I was helping out in an orphanage, and I had this moment where I realized I had such a greater purpose than the life I was living. And I had this prayer in that moment, and I said, God, I'm done doing life my way. I want to do life your way. Now, when it comes to purpose, I don't care how young and old you are, we are all looking for purpose. And I truly believe the only way to find that, to truly find it, is through Jesus. Now, I know that sounds cliche, but it is true. If you can live a life that glorifies God, that means you are going to live a life where you are a light in this world. You are showing the love of God to other people. You are helping other people. You are being a part of establishing God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. So you want to find purpose? Get in the Bible and see how God calls you to live.
Well, today it really stood out to me, my conversation with Dr. Steve, that, things like anxiety and depression and some of the mental health challenges that many of us can experience and struggle at different stages and even ages in our life can hinder us from being part of a church. So I hope that you were encouraged today to lean into this, to think about those in your life or even yourself. What are some of the barriers that might be keeping you or your loved one away from church? And let's take steps to help people feel like they have a safe place, that they have someone to walk through them with them. Dr. Steve has a very important conference coming up April 21st to 23rd. It's on disabilities and the church. Go to keyministry.org. It's for ministry leaders or those that are really wanting to respond. And we would love for you to call us and with your best gift, send you our monthly devotional. So go to theperspective.tv. You can also call our prayer line at 1-855-910-6297. We're here for you. I hope today, whatever battles you're facing, that God is with you. He's going to help you. He's going to bring the victory. He loves you. Thanks for watching today.